Then, when the high priest extracted his mana, he would use the center of his mind to filter out the mistrust and doubt from his mana. His mana would become pure, without a trace of doubt, and only the pure faith of Iman would enter there. In order to fully absorb the blessing to its maximum potential, he would focus on his spiritual power of this avatar. The high priest was blinded by the amount of sacred power of this recruit. The entire room began to shine, causing everyone to scream in surprise. The recruits were very surprised and pointed their fingers. They couldn't quite believe it. One of the recruits said that the sacred power had reached the very head of the deity statue. The high priest touched his shoulder and said that he had just been baptized. He couldn't believe that the recruit was already at such a level. His rank is almost equal to that of a priestess. Such deep faith impresses him. Let him continue to work hard. Heinrich thanked him with a smile on his face. A system window popped up in front of him, that he had acquired the Holy Baptism skill. It allows one to distribute spiritual power more effectively between avatars. He thought, looking at his hand, is this the limit of holy power? It is a great relief to him. He doubts that a fake faith built on illusions would work. Although it seems to him that the skill did not work at full strength. The deity of the church is closer to the system, is a personal God closer to the individual. But when he opened his mind earlier, if he needed to express the confusion he feels about human emotions, it would be something similar to curiosity. Is this what it means to monitor? Such power should only be used for the sake of good. After a while, in one of the meeting rooms, Lacius and Tuscan stood in front of a map with chips and arranged tactics. Tuscan said that it would all melt away. They had not been able to find a single village as the heir to the immortal king for a month. Lacius said that he had nothing to show the deity. He looked at him and said that, in addition, he felt that further support from the kingdom of Talia was becoming difficult. The vampire organization hidden within the kingdom was probably involved. The other ones started moving the chips on the table and said that during their pursuit of Hans, the misunderstanding of the vampire slope and the oath of disobedience were too great. He picked up the chip and said that since the assassination squad had not achieved any results, the political pressure from the state continued to increase, and they were using this as leverage. He hit himself on the head and said that the assassination squad would be disbanded, and that his subordinates would send everyone back to the capital. Tuscan accepted his order and left the room. He thought that they were surrounded on all sides, the paladins were becoming insufficient. What should he do with this information? He exhaled and looked at the street where the recruits were fighting. He thought, are these the recruits who were baptized today? Suddenly, he noticed something interesting and began to look closely. How one of the recruits hit Heinrich with his weapon. He responded with his elbow to his face, causing the other to fall to the floor, losing his weapon. The trainer shouted that Heinrich won this battle. A system window popped up in front of him, that the avatar had achieved enlightenment through repeated training. He received the skill. Crusader fighting technique. Suddenly, the wound on his body began to heal. He thought that with super regeneration and sacred power, the wound was completely healed. The recruit covered his sweaty face and asked, did he perhaps allow himself to be hit? Heinrich tried to help him up and said that the gain was worth the candle, tactics are his style. He thought that this was still not enough. For further growth, new changes in his abilities were needed. Suddenly Tuscan approached them and said that this was of course about the sacred power. He was already at the level of a trainer or a high-ranking paladin. His opponent was very surprised by what he heard. He continued to say that he was still not experienced enough to become a paladin. Heinrich tried to find out what he meant. He said that he probably felt more than the others. He extended his hand to him and said that he would make him much stronger. Would he go with him to the Rosalia temple? The protagonist asked what he should do in this great temple. He asked in response, did he have some kind of problem? Heinrich extended his hand to him and said that he had no problem at all. Of course he wanted to go with him. Tuscan started to leave and said with a dissatisfied face that then he should follow him and not leave right now. He ran after the paladin and asked if he could give him some time to pack his things. He replied that he should entrust it to someone else. They came into the room and stood on the glowing runes. Tuscan took him by the shoulder and said that he understood perfectly well that this was all unexpected. Everything would be explained to them in detail on the spot. He replied that he understood everything perfectly well. After some time, they found themselves at the Great Temple. The protagonist thought that this was the famous Great Temple of Rosalia. This is the largest sanctuary of the church, located in the very center of the continent. This is the very place where both the Father and the Goddess arrive, the heart of the church itself. Rister was waiting for them inside, who greeted them with all good intentions. She said that they had come a long way and were probably tired. They knelt before her and thanked her for this. The protagonist thought that he was entering the great temple where the goddess was. This is the perfect place for rapid development. There he will become a recognized paladin. He must gain strength and develop to his full potential. And he will deal with the dirty work in the shadows with the help of Hans. At that moment, Hans was sitting on the roof, surrounded by corpses. He looked at the news feed about the Seine on his phone. He said that he had definitely become a celebrity, and the remnants of the human trafficking organization had been destroyed. He thought there was something else strange. What was this divine retribution society that the villains kept mentioning? They kept yelling at them to kill this bastard. If everyone lost this opportunity, the divine retribution society would not forgive them. He thought it seemed like they were connected to several organizations. He stood up and said while pulling himself up that he thought he would figure this out and continue to destroy them. Now, was it time to distribute his profits? At this moment, Heinz was walking down the street wearing a mask and thought that if the Haho mask started trading large amounts of valuable items from unknown sources, he would be the prime suspect. He walked into one of the premises and thought that he needed a private place to do these transactions. An employee of the establishment greeted him. He handed him a bag of money and said that he wanted to sell something. The employee asked, did he think this was a pawn shop? He was not interested in what he had brought, so he should get lost. Heinz emptied the contents of the bag and said that he had heard that they were interested in such things. The employee was very surprised by what he saw and began to look through everything. He thought that these were the badges of a group that was engaged in human trafficking, a trading syndicate group. He had heard that they were destroyed by some madman in a mask. The protagonist looked at him and asked if he was interested in this offer. The other one began to get nervous and said that he should go through the back door, he should not try to leave. After a while, he went through the back door and got to the right place. The masked man greeted him and asked if he wanted to sell something. Heinz agreed with him and asked if he could get money in a form other than cash. After that, he handed the bag to the masked man, and the other one began to look at the contents. He asked if he meant material goods. What was he looking for? The protagonist stuck out his finger and said that he needed a lottery ticket for the grand prize. Preferably as soon as possible if possible. He thought that cash was completely useless if he couldn't spend it. Right now, he needed legal funds for the real Sun Hyun. A lottery ticket would make his funds untraceable and clean. The masked man asked, did he need a lottery ticket? The commission would be quite high. Would that be no problem for him? The protagonist said it was no problem. How much could it be sold for? The masked man said it was 6-1 and the redemption period was 4 months. The protagonist asked him to prepare 2 of them. The masked man said that with the amount he paid, that would not happen. He replied that he shouldn't worry about it. He had plenty of materials for it. He took out some gold bars from space and asked, would that be enough for him? The masked man began to feel his hand and asked, a subspace storage tool? Who the hell is he? These are very unusual materials, where did he get them from? Heinz started to complain about his hand being touched, after which he said that he hadn't come there to chat. Let him finish this deal quickly if he agreed to it. The masked man apologized to him and said that they should finish quickly then. Heinz used his ability and thought that he constantly smelled a faint scent of blood, so it turns out that it was not his imagination. He moved closer to him and said that it was wonderful, this wasn't their last deal. From now on they would see each other often. After a while, he went outside and happily looked at his checks. He asked who would have thought that he would use his dream and win the lottery? What should he buy? It would be good for him to have several subordinates for such things. It would be difficult for him to go back and forth so constantly. He would consider it an opportunity to enjoy the night air. He thought, looking at the passers-by, that a few months ago the street was empty because of the organization that traded people, but now life is in full swing again. Maybe because of all those rumors. He was glad to know that he was involved in establishing peace. Gamma came up to him from behind, whispering in his ear a question, where is he from? He turned around in fear and thought, who is it? How did he sneak up on him unnoticed? Gamma began to calm him down and said that he should not worry. He just wanted to chat for a while, that's all. The protagonist asked, what is he talking about? He snuck up on him from behind and sniffed him, what's the matter? Gamma asked, is he a vampire? That's right. He is on the 6th level, born due to the change of Dathomir. What is his name? When did he return to Earth? The protagonist thought, another vampire traveler through dimensions? What game does he play? He needed to come up with some bullshit and get out of there. Suddenly, he started saying things he didn't want to because of the hypnosis. He said his name was Hines and he hadn't been on Earth for a long time. He thought, why was he answering him so easily? Was it all because of his mind control powers? Gamma said that was very good. He was a newbie who had just returned to Earth. Let him introduce himself properly. He was a man from the Blood Pack organization, which included all the vampires on Earth. He handed him a business card and said that his job was to collect vampires who had recently returned to Earth. The protagonist took the card and asked, is such an organization real? Gamma sighed and said that if he wanted to survive, they'd better stick together. He had no choice, did he? He looked at him with disbelief and asked, by the way, what did the level he had mentioned earlier mean? Gamma asked, does it seem like he was starting to be interested in this information? Then they should leave to chat there instead. He took out his car keys and asked why they didn't visit the organization. The protagonist saw a cool car and agreed to go with him. Jean Soran was watching all this from the side, silently. She transmitted through the headphones of the headquarters that the target was moving according to plan, and they were following him. After a while, they reached the area. Gamma told him not to be shy and go in. The protagonist asked what kind of place this was. He replied that every vampire has a vampire factor that determines their level of strength. They measure it and rank it by level. And with this magic circle, he can measure the level of the vampire factor. He brought him to a room with vampires and runes. Hines was very surprised by this and thought, is this a magic circle? This is too suspicious a phenomenon. Gamma pointed to the circle and asked what it was doing. Let him quickly enter it. The protagonist thought that if it was dangerous, he could just cancel the call. But there was a skull there, from which dark magic emanated. He looked closely at his new acquaintance, and thought that this was not just dark magic, it was shamanism, curse, alchemy, different types of it were collected in it. How is this even possible? About 20 years have passed since the returnees began to appear. The reason why magical tools are still rare and magical technologies are not developed is because the energy laws of ability and dimension are different. To combine such different abilities into one, the Blood Pack is a much more impressive organization than he thought. One of the vampires asked him to hold out his hand. He cut his palm and said that it would burn a little. The blood from Heinz's hand began to levitate. One of the vampires said that 5 balls were formed, which means it is the 5th level. Judging by how tightly the balls are connected, his regeneration abilities are quite strong. The protagonist thought that purebreds from Auterica were about the 5th or 6th level. Gamma smiled and said that he was already nervous. He came from a dimension he had never heard of, but he could only reach level 5. This was just a waste of time. At level 5, there was no need to cut off limbs. So they had to start. All the vampires in that room agreed with them, activated their abilities. Hines was very scared and thought that this meant that they had another motive after all. He knew very well that this was too complicated a ritual for a simple level dimension. He needed to summon Hans quickly. At that moment, there was a knock on the door, which made Gamma nervous. Soran broke the door with her foot, shouting that everyone needed to be frozen. She wanted Gamma from the Blood Pack, who was a level 6 vampire. She said that she would arrest them for kidnapping and killing relatives. Gamma looked at her and asked in surprise, don't they think it's rude to barge in here out of the blue? The protagonist thought that this girl seemed quite familiar to him. Who was she? She pointed her finger and said that when she first received information about this, that they were kidnapping vampires, she did not know whether to believe it or not. But it turned out to be true. She shouted in a commanding tone that he must let the vampires go and surrender. Gamma said that he expected this from a loyal and naive slave and a bloody package. But have they ever wondered why they had to be slaves in the first place? He stood in a majestic pose and shouted that they were much stronger than humans. Why did they have to follow the rules of the Blood Pack, tiptoe around humans, and secretly live underground? Soran screamed angrily, what kind of nonsense was this? It was because of them, the warlike ones who came up with such nonsense, that they were forced to hide underground. Gamma smiled and said that it was because they thought so. And did her comrades think the same way? At this moment, the vampires behind her began to doubt. She was very surprised by this and asked him again. Min Yun hit one of his acquaintances and activated his ability. She looked at him and shouted, what the hell was he doing? Why did he betray them? At this moment, he sank several of his claws into her. She fell to the ground, and he asked why he betrayed her? For him, the reason is simple: in his dimension he was a powerful lord, and in this reality he is stuck in a basement, and works as a bouncer in some club. Now does she understand the reason? Not every vampire is comfortable living like her. Gamma leaned towards her, and so Ran asked what his plan is? Kidnapping vampires? What is he trying to achieve by doing this? Is he planning to start a rebellion against the Blood Pack? Gamma smiled and asked, stupid lower vampires? How many centuries does she think it will take? He used his ability and said that in this dimension, you can't accumulate more karma points, which means they can't get stronger. But after careful research, they found a way. This method is reliable to get stronger in a short time. He began to lift the body of one of the vampires. She asked in shock, what is he talking about? Let him not tell her that he is breaking the taboo, right? He smiled, bringing his neck to his face and asked, then where did all the kidnapped vampires go? She got angry and asked him not to tell her that he was creating mad vampires again. Had he forgotten why they were being persecuted? Heinz looked at it and thought, mad vampires? She means cannibals? But there is no such cannibalism on Earth. When a vampire devours a vampire from another dimension, their differences, the vampire factors, combine. This leads to an increase in strength, but there is a high price to pay. Cannibalism among their ancestors caused severe mental disorders. If someone cannot overcome themselves, they become mad vampires who go crazy with thirst. After the appearance of the first mad vampire, they began to be considered a global threat. Gamma smiled and said that they do not need to worry about this. After countless studies, they have found a way to remove the residual desires for blood. Gamma's victim began to scream in pain. He screamed that they are creating excellent materials for their research. The protagonist looked at it and thought that this magic circle, it was not only created to separate empirical factors. It was meant to transfer a drug without side effects into vampires. Minion said that Gamma should keep his promise. He took a risk to secretly follow him. The other agreed with him, and then threw him a pill as promised. Minion ate the pill that was passed to him, and then began to completely change in his appearance and become stronger. He smiled and said that now he understands what it is. He has become bigger. He can't believe that this is really possible. He grabbed Ran by the throat and asked, doesn't he mean to say that he will give them more drugs? Let him do it immediately, otherwise someone will get hurt. Gamma pretended to panic and told him to stop, because he understands, he is happy with his new strength, but it will take time. After all, their new guest, who arrived before him, is still sitting and waiting. Let him wait a little longer, isn't that hard? The protagonist stood up from his knees and said that there were 2 purebreds and 4 half-breeds. Cannibalism really works. Gamma looked at him in surprise. Heinz filled with strength and said that he can't wait, he wants to see how strong he will become after he absorbs them all. They screamed, what the hell is this? At that moment, Hans appeared in the room with his army and said that they know how to hide. But they did not think about safety, so he is very sorry. Let them not leave this place without his permission in the future. Hans' army moved out to fight. Minion panicked and asked, who else are they? Gamma screamed that they can't panic. They must stick together. If they get separated, they will all be killed. He used his ability and began to fight the skeletons. He ran at Hans and screamed for him to die. Hans thought that the transformation of this body was unusual. Although even the appearance of vampires is different from one dimension to another, isn't it? He slammed his staff on the floor, causing magical copies to stick into Minion through his body. Hans smiled and said that he wanted to catch them with minimal losses. Heinz jumped onto the battlefield and said that he didn't think so, nothing would help. He burped at him and asked, is this a disadvantage of organic farming? Then they have no problem. He bit him and thought that there will be more food ahead. Minion began to scream in pain and misunderstanding. Gamma saw this and asked, what is this vampire doing? Let them not tell him that he is now devouring his own kind? Heinz drank his blood and heard his thoughts. Minion thought, how did he even live until now? With what determination did he betray them? He can't die like this. Heinz wiped his face and said that he was right, insanity was much worse. Because he could hear every thought, obsession. His teeth started falling out, which surprised him greatly. He thought that he could feel the different empirical factors reuniting and evolving. A system window popped up in front of him, saying that he had gained a special ability, hybrid evolution. It was a sharp increase in physical abilities every time he absorbed new empirical factors. The user steals the abilities of the target's bloodline. He looked at Gamma and said that this was pretty good. With that kind of power, if he were to go blood crazy, he would be very dangerous. Now he had to see, he needed an organization to carry out his order. What about the blood pack? If anyone dared to oppose him, they would become the next meal. There was a second option, becoming part of the undead army. After a while, Heinz was eating the remaining vampires. A system window popped up in front of him, saying that he had gained a new vampire trait. Under the influence of hybrid evolution, the trait Insight was obtained. Insight can measure the physical condition and stats of the enemy. He licked his lips and said that Insight is a very useless skill. He thought that vampires have a special supernatural skill called Heritage, based on their origin. With this skill, he will master hybrid evolution. He will be able to steal all their powers. Gamma hung on the cross he built and asked how he did it. What the hell? How can you devour your own kind and remain sane? Heinz approached him and asked with a smile, was he curious? He wants him to tell him how to prevent the corruption of the mind? That whisper he hears while eating, let him just not listen to it. Gamma panicked, screaming, what kind of nonsense is he talking about? After that, he began to scream in pain. A system window popped up in front of the protagonist, saying that under the influence of hybrid evolution, he had obtained the skill, Camouflage. Camouflage allows one to hide one's presence. He looked at the transformed Gamma and asked with a smile, had he been using camouflage all this time? That's pretty good. There are many ways to use it. Now, should he look into this bastard's head? Gamma thought that research, collaboration, support, public divine retribution technology. And he promised something to Mr. Beta. The protagonist panicked and thought, who the hell is this? Perhaps this is his patron? And the Public Retribution Society is mentioned again. It seems that this complex ritual is also their doing. What the hell are these guys up to, helping the bloody package? After a while, Heinz and Soran were driving together in a car through the city at night. The vampire asked her if she was finally coming to her senses. She was very surprised by this and screamed, he is a piece of trash who sold his life. Where is he taking her? She grabbed him by the throat. He screamed for her to stop and look closely. They grabbed him too. And if she doesn't let go, they'll get into an accident. Soran let go of his throat and asked, I apologized to him, can he explain to her what happened? Heinz asked if she knew Haho's mask. He escaped during the chaos when a group of vigilantes burst in. She put her hand on her heart and said that even in this chaos, he went out of his way to save her. She thanks him very much for that. He thought that her voice and face were very familiar, but no matter how he looked at her, he was haunted by the feeling that he had seen her somewhere before. He asked what happened there. They were from the Bloody Bag, but they were fighting against each other. She looked at the passing area and said that the Bloody Bag was divided between the radicals and moderates. They found evidence that the radicals kidnapped one of their team members, so she went there with her colleagues and was close to it. But still, she was very glad that they got out of there in one piece. They even found out what those bastards were up to. He had to inform the higher-ups and put an end to this. He thought that she really thought that this would be resolved somehow so easily. It was quite obvious that even the highest ranks of the radicals would be involved. Soran looked at him happily and asked, by the way, who is he related to, as a savior? He looks very strong. Heinz said let her call him whatever she wants and as she feels comfortable. She asked if she could call him Oppo then. He said he had just returned to Earth, so he hadn't bonded with anyone yet. He followed Gamma because he was curious about the blood pack. She smiled and asked if she could join the blood pack. Most vampires were part of it. Moderate vampires didn't do such shady things, and they had a steady supply of blood packs thanks to their partnerships with blood banks. He asked if he could see it. She said she would definitely show him. They arrived at the place after a while. Soran told him they had to go through here. There was a little girl named Nahi standing in the room, and she ran to the door at the sound. Soran came closer to her, and then the other one ran up to hug her. Nahi said she heard what happened. Was she okay? The other one smiled and asked if her little girl was okay. She pointed at her new friend and told her to say hello to him. He was their friend who would be joining the blood pack. Nahi looked at him with a scared expression and said hello. Heinz waved and smiled. Soran patted her head and told her that she would show him the room and that she should stay there and play. Nahi said that she should just come back soon. After a while, they started to go up to the room. The protagonist said that the girl looked very small. Is it just her appearance? Soran turned around and said that it was not just that, she was not a returner. He asked, aren't all vampires returners? She said that was not true, Nahi was born and raised on Earth, but her father was a returner. He turned her into a vampire to save her from a chronic disease. The protagonist thought that now he understood why the government wanted to keep vampires under control. In a way, they were no different from an infectious disease. So Ran turned around and said that of course this method was not the one vampires usually use. It takes several times more power to turn someone on the ground, so her father wanted her to be able to feel confident even under the sun. He had reached his limit. After a while, they reached her room and she let him in. She said that if he needed anything, he should call her. It was already quite late, so he should rest. She said goodbye to him with her signature gesture. Heinz was very surprised by this and thought that this gesture, this voice, he was starting to remember who she looked like. He pointed his finger at her and asked, "Is she the streamer Orchid?" So Ran was very surprised and screamed, "What did he just say?" She covered her face with her hands and embarrassedly said that this event from the stream was stuck in her head. He is not one of her subscribers. He awkwardly waved his hand and said that it was not so, it was just that the algorithms recommended her to him a couple of times. She sighed with relief and said that it was good because she almost died of shame. In fact, she was a trainee. When she quit, she felt sad and decided to stream. Heinz asked how old she was then. She says she is 22 years old. She awakened when she was 19. How old is he? When did he awaken? He felt awkward, quickly slammed the door behind him and shouted that he would tell her about it later. She was very surprised by this and asked what she asked wrong. Maybe she really said something wrong? He exhaled and thought that she was much younger than he thought, and that's why he spoke informally. The main character is only 20 years old. He thought that it turns out that she is older than him. He stayed on the bed and said that in any case, she looked familiar, she is a streamer. He heard that she is quite famous, maybe he should look something up on the internet? He went to the page with the notifications about the breaks in the broadcast. It said that she wanted to inform everyone, she was taking a break from streaming for about a week due to work duties. She will do her best to finish this as soon as possible and return to the extreme. She really hopes that they will see each other in a week. He moved his finger across the screen and thought, after she posted this, she went to the scene of the crime? If it weren't for him, this would have been her last announcement. It was very close and dangerous. The next morning, Soran was talking on the phone and screamed, "What did he say? How can he not find anything?" At this moment, the protagonist woke up with a headache and thought, what was that noise in the early morning? He started to go down the stairs to find out what happened. She screamed again, he says, "There is no evidence to prove this fact. How is this even possible?" Heinz asked her what happened there. She saw his presence and asked, did he wake up? She put the phone away from her ear and said that her colleagues had gone to the crime scene yesterday, but everything had been burned, so they couldn't find anything. Now they couldn't come for the radicals. The protagonist put his fist to his face and thought that they had gone too far. He would try to erase Hans's traces. He said that it was very bad, but he had to ask her something. Let her tell him where the radicals' base was. He picked up his phone, and she was very surprised by this and asked why he needed the radicals' base. She screamed, let him just not say that he didn't like the bloody bag? He began to calm her down and told her to calm down, because that was not true. They were dangerous bastards, wouldn't it be better to know their locations? We should avoid them, right? She put her hand to her heart, and exhaling, said that of course that made sense. Let him wait a second. Heinz thought that he was now at the border of pure blood territory, which by Earth standards was level 6 and 7. He would have to turn him into a pure blood with his parents' help. So Ran handed him the phone and told him to hold on to this. If he avoided the marked places, he would be safe. And since he was standing up, maybe she should cook something for him? He showed her his palms, told her that he didn't need anything and that she shouldn't worry. He looked around, there were many good restaurants nearby. He looked at the dots on his phone and said, licking his lips, that's why he was thinking of going for a walk and eating good food.